the little things that I love in The Lord of the Rings is, or I guess in this case are, a few choice words from Gimli.
I must go for my axe.
Indeed. All right, I agree. A little context would be helpful here, because those words sound as if they were said in preparation for a battle, several of which Gimli fought in, which is impressive enough, but he also survived them all, which is even more impressive, and all of which featured him with an axe as his weapon of choice. And so, those words could have been said before, say, Helm's Deep, which did feature a weapons take which Gimli was a part of, with him finding and donning a cap of iron and leather that fitted well upon his round head, and a small shield, which bore the running horse, white upon green, that was the emblem of the house of Eomer. This shield in particular is a fine choice, as we discover that it once belonged to Theoden himself. "May it keep you well," said Theoden. "It was made for me in Thengel's day, while I was still a boy." Gimli bowed.
I am proud, Lord of the Mark, to bear your device.
Well said. And he might not have been proud to bear the cap as well, but he was surely thankful for it. After victory has been achieved, Legolas finds Gimli walking with Eomer. He had no helm, we are told, and about his head was a linen band stained with blood. But his voice was loud and strong.
It was only a feeble blow, and the cap turned it.
Cap, shield, but no axe to be spoken of here. And so those words about going to get his axe could have been said before the Battle of the Pelennor Fields, with him arriving on the scene via boats liberated from the corsairs of Umbar. "Thus came Aragorn, son of Arathorn," the description of the arrival goes, "Elisar, Isildur's heir, out of the paths of the dead, borne upon a wind from the sea to the kingdom of Gondor. The hosts of Mordor were seized with bewilderment, and a great wizardry it seemed to them that their own ships should be filled with their foes. There came Legolas and Gimli, wielding his axe." There are others with them, of course, but the important part here is that he has the axe, and he uses it well on the battlefield. At least we can assume so, that is, since there is not much mention of Gimli's part in the battle. There's too many others to talk about. But he does say afterward,
"It was a great day, and a great hour."
But the words about him going to get that axe are nowhere to be found here. They could have come, then, before the long march from Minas Tirith to the Morannon, where the last battle in the War of the Ring took place in front of the Black Gate of Mordor, and where, thankfully, Gimli happened to be present to find Pippin after the fighting was over.
"But for Gimli the dwarf," he says to Pippin, "you would have been lost then. But at least I know now the look of a hobbit's foot, though it be all that can be seen under a heap of bodies. And when I heaved the great carcass off you, I made sure you were dead. I could have torn out my beard."
But no, the preparation for that ride into battle does not feature Gimli telling anyone that he must go for his axe. It's certainly possible that Gimli said those words before he and his father Glóin left Erebor to come to Rivendell. Alas, we don't have that moment in the text. We do have the description of what Gimli is armed with when he and the company take their leave of the place to begin the quest to destroy the ring. Gimli the dwarf alone wore openly a short shirt of steel rings, for dwarves make light of burdens, and in his belt was a broad-bladed axe. We know, too, that these did not come from Rivendell. At least the short shirt didn't. Because during the weapons take before Helm's Deep, we read, "Gimli needed no coat of rings, even if one had been found to match his stature. for there was no hauberk in the hordes of Aedoras of better make than his short corslet forged beneath the mountain in the north. Meaning, of course, Erebor. Presumably the axe came with him all that way, too. Maybe he should have come with an iron cap as well, like he does in the Peter Jackson film, which shows Gimli with a helmet from the very beginning. In the text, for as helpful as the Rohan cap, which he chooses before Helm's Deep, was in turning the orc blow, it couldn't have been that good. 2 days after receiving his injury, Gimli notes,
"I have a sore head."
An Erebor cap may have done better. On the other hand, it was probably an Uruk-hai that he was fighting when he got that blow, and so it was undoubtedly a mighty blow, no matter what headgear he was wearing. Well, maybe not. The Ralph Bakshi film shows Gimli with a hood from the very beginning, much like the dwarves in The Hobbit wear, and which is probably more correct to what he would have been wearing upon arrival at Rivendell. But in that movie, he still has it come Helm's Deep. Not the best defense against orc blows, I would say. Cap aside, it is curious, of course, that Gimli would come so well armored to Rivendell, arriving with no notion whatsoever of what he will be walking into. After all, how could he know that accompanying his father on a trip to the last homely house to warn Bilbo that Sauron was looking for him would result in Gimli being swept up and becoming a major player in the most important crisis to face Middle-earth in 3,000 years, for which a fine coat of rings would prove most helpful. Still, it's understandable. The passage from Dale to Rivendell, Glóin tells us, would long ago have become impassable, but for the Beornings. But, as we learned early on in the Shadow of the Past chapter, with rumors of strange things happening in the world outside, evil in Mirkwood, orcs multiplying, trolls abroad, I can certainly see a sensible dwarf deciding that it would be safer to go armored on any long journey than not. And armed, too, since it seems extremely likely that Gimli's axe came from the Lonely Mountain as well. And if so, one can assume it was of the same fine make as that armor. It's not perfect, though. In the Battle of the Hornburg, Gimli does outdo Legolas in their game of how many orcs they kill.
42, Master Legolas,
he cried. But,
alas, my axe is notched. The 42nd had an iron collar on his neck.
If, as we can safely assume, Gimli does not replace his axe throughout the rest of the story, the notch remains, possibly being a badge of honor, as it were, to maybe accompany a story told of how the notch was received, possibly along with a description, too, of each of those 41 other orcs killed before it happened. Whether that occurs or not, it seems pretty clear that it is that axe which Gimli has had the entire story, and which is the one he references with those 6 words that I love.
I must go for my axe.
Because those words are not said in any kind of battle context. They are actually said in peacetime, late in the story, and to Eomer. The scene takes place on July 18, 3rd Age, 3019, slightly less than 4 months since the destruction of the ring. And we read, Eomer of Rohan came riding to the city, Minas Tirith, and with him came an Eored of the fairest knights of the Mark. He was welcomed, and when they sat all at table in Merathrond, the great hall of feasts, he beheld the beauty of the ladies that he saw, and was filled with great wonder. And before he went to his rest, he sent for Gimli the dwarf, and he said to him, Gimli, Glóin's son, have you your axe ready?
Nay, lord, said Gimli, but I can speedily fetch it, if there be need.
You shall judge, said Eomer, for there are certain rash words concerning the lady in the golden wood that lies still between us, and now I have seen her with my eyes.
Well, lord, said Gimli, and what say you now?
Alas, said Eomer. I will not say that she is the fairest lady that lives.
Then I must go for my axe.
So there they are, in context. And every time I encounter them, I like to think that they are delivered comically. After all, the war is over. The ring is gone, Sauron is gone, and Aragorn has been crowned king. Gimli isn't seriously suggesting that he will actually fight Eomer right here and now, is he? It has to be a joke. After everything that the two of them have been through, alone as well as together, fighting at Helm's Deep, and the Pelennor Fields, and at the Black Gate. It just has to be a joke, right? I mean, it should be. Except for the fact that dwarves, as we're told in the Silmarillion, are stone-hard and stubborn, and don't do a lot of joking around, it would seem. Especially here, when taking into account the reason for Gimli threatening to go get his axe in the first place. That being that Eomer has just said something negative about Galadriel. Now, this topic has been a bone of contention ever since the two of them first met back in Rohan.
Have you sprung from the grass?
Eomer says of the three hunters, Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli, reacting to their strange raiment, that is, their elven cloaks, which have effectively camouflaged them against the landscape.
How did you escape our sight? Are you elvish folk?
No, said Aragorn, only one of us is an elf, Legolas of the woodland realm in distant Mirkwood. But we have passed through Lothlorien, and the gifts and favor of the lady go with us. Eomer looks on them with wonder when he hears that.
Then there is a lady in the Golden Wood, as old tales tell, he said. Few escape her nets, they say. These are strange days. But if you have her favor, then you also are net weavers and sorcerers, maybe.
He turned a cold glance suddenly upon Legolas and Gimli.
Why do you not speak, silent ones? He demanded.
Gimli rose and planted his feet firmly apart. His hand gripped the handle of his axe, and his dark eyes flashed.
Let Gimli the dwarf, Glowin-son, warn you against foolish words. You speak evil of that which is fair beyond the reach of your thought, and only little wit can excuse you.
This, naturally, does not ease things in the slightest. Eomer's eyes blazed, and the men of Rohan murmured angrily and closed in, advancing their spears. I would cut off your head, beard and all, Master Dwarf, if it but stood a little higher from the ground. Now, I would say that Eomer has grounds for being so aggressive, and it's not just Gimli's challenging words. He notes that these are strange days, and he knows that danger is all around. He and his men have just come from killing over 200 orcs, for goodness sakes. He is also under orders. It is against our law to let strangers wander at will in our lands, until the king himself shall give them leave. And more strict is the command in these days of peril. Keywords here being days of peril. Whatever Eomer has said to prompt Gimli's response is irrelevant to the fact of these three strange persons trespassing through Rohan. By the letter of the law, they should meet with the same fate as those orcs. And one wonders, too, if there isn't some natural prejudice of the men of Rohan against dwarves. This is only a guess, of course, but when one reads on in the book, deep into the appendices, that is, evidence of the potential for such a prejudice is revealed. It's in the section about the house of Eorl, where we find this. Many lords and warriors, and many fair and valiant women, are named in the songs of Rohan that still remember the north, which is where the people of Rohan came from. Of Fram, they tell that he slew Scatha, the great dragon of Ered Mithrin, and the land had peace from the long worms afterwards. Thus, Fram won great wealth, but was at feud with the dwarves, who claimed the hoard of Scatha. Fram would not yield them a penny, and sent them instead the teeth of Scatha, made into a necklace, saying, "Jewels such as these you will not match in your treasuries, for they are hard to come by." Some say that the dwarves slew Fram for this insult. There was no great love between Eotheod and the dwarves. Eotheod being the men of the northern region up near Ered Mithrin, who will eventually become the men of Rohan. Of this incident, we naturally hear echoes of the ruin of Doriath, as revealed in the Silmarillion. Hammond and Skull break it down for us in their Lord of the Rings, A Reader's Companion. In later days, the dwarves lusted after the Silmaril in the Nauglamir, the necklace of the dwarves that had come into the possession of the Sindarin King Thingol of Doriath, whom they slew. And in the resulting war of vengeance, many elves and dwarves were slain, and it has not been forgotten. And those echoes are not just the race hatred that evolves out of these situations. It's what brings it about. Treasure. After all, we know that there were 7 rings of power given to the dwarves, and of them the Silmarillion tells us, it is said that the foundation of each of the 7 hoards of the dwarf kings of old was a golden ring. But all those hoards long ago were plundered, and the dragons devoured them. And of the 7 rings, some were consumed in fire, and some Sauron recovered. Gandalf confirms this when he tells Frodo about the rings of power, that of those 7, 3 Sauron has recovered, and the others the dragons have consumed. It's a fair bet, then, that Scatha was one of those dragons, and that his hoard was one of the 7 hoards of the dwarf kings of old. It's therefore no wonder that the dwarves were so mad at Fram's taking of the treasure once Scatha was gone, in essence denying the right of the dragon slayer to the spoils of his victory, not unlike Thorin Oakenshield denying any treasure to the men of Lake Town, from whose ranks the slayer of Smaug, Bard, had come. Because it's important to remember what the rings of power do in the hands of the dwarves. They ill endure the domination of others, we are told, domination being what the rings of power are all about. Instead, they used their rings only for the getting of wealth. But wrath and an overmastering greed of gold were kindled in their hearts. So those dwarves of old, those stone-hard and stubborn beings, filled with both wrath and greed, would naturally grow to hate and despise anyone who wanted, or worse, took, their treasure. It's, as they say, and with no disrespect to Bard's grandson, quite on brand. Whether a ring of power was truly the start of this hoard is not clear, nor do we know if that ring of power was consumed by Scatha. But we do know Fram slew Scatha, and that his tale was almost certainly turned into one of those songs that still remember the North, and which are sung in Rohan. Does Eomer know such a song? I would say so. And why not? Aragorn says of the men of Rohan, they sing many songs after the manner of the children of men before the dark years. And after all, who can resist a tale about a dragon, especially one where the hero who conquers it is one of your ancestors? That the dwarves come out as the ultimate bad guys in such a song is a nice little addition. So, given that, and that Eomer has probably never met a dwarf before now, a deep-seated dislike of them could be in there somewhere, even in so noble a fellow as Eomer, which would go along with his natural distrust of strangers wandering at will within his lands. Still, he has probably never met an elf either, but if so, he certainly has not met Galadriel. As such, he has not had the chance to be won over by her as Gimli has. Now, this devotion that he develops for her could be said to begin before they actually meet, when the blindfolds are taken off of the company as they make their way through Lothlorien. You are all to walk free, Haldir tells them, even the dwarf Gimli. It seems the lady knows who and what is each member of the company. When Gimli does meet Galadriel, she says to him, "Welcome, Gimli, son of Glóin. It is long indeed since we saw one of Durin's folk in Caris Galadhon. But today we have broken our long law. May it be a sign that though the world is now dark, better days are at hand, and that friendship shall be renewed between our peoples." Gimli bowed low. Celeborn, however, is not so moved. Hearing about the Balrog, he declares that
But had I known that the dwarves had stirred up this evil in Moria again, I would have forbidden you to pass the northern borders.
He says this to Gimli, as if it was Gimli's fault that the Balrog existed, but he does at least add that he would have forbidden you and all that went with you. Celeborn is surely one of those elves who have not forgotten what went on between elves and dwarves back in Thingol's day. Galadriel has surely not forgotten that either, but her attitude is entirely different. "Do not repent your welcome to the dwarf," she tells her husband. And then she knowingly cites the dwarf names of Kelidzarum, Kibble-Nala, and Khazad-dûm. And she looked upon Gimli, who sat glowering and sad, and she smiled. And the dwarf, hearing the names given in his own ancient tongue, looked up and met her eyes. And it seemed to him that he looked suddenly into the heart of an enemy, and saw there love and understanding. Wonder came into his face, and then he smiled in answer. He rose clumsily and bowed in dwarf fashion, saying, "Yet more fair is the living land of Lorien, and the Lady Galadriel is above all the jewels that lie beneath the earth." His feelings about elves as a whole change from this point on. Up until now, he and Legolas have been sniping at each other about which race did what and when. But now, Gimli becomes open to the possibility of that friendship of which Galadriel spoke. It grows between he and Legolas from here, but also between he and Legolas's people. Later, he will say this: "If all the fair folk take to the havens, it will be a duller world for those who are doomed to stay." Hardly something Gimli would have said before entering Lothlorien, I should say. Upon leaving it, when gifts are being presented to the company, Galadriel asks Gimli what he will do with the gift that he has asked her for, a single strand of her hair. "Treasure it, lady," he answered, "in memory of your words to me at our first meeting. And if ever I return to the smithies of my home, it shall be set in imperishable crystal, to be an heirloom of my house, and a pledge of goodwill between the mountain and the wood until the end of days." But that's not all, because the text tells us that upon their leaving that land and the lady, Gimli wept openly. And he laments not simply the loss, but that in coming on this journey, torment in the dark was the danger that I feared, but I would not have come had I known the danger of light and joy. This relationship then between Gimli and Galadriel is far more than, oh, she's just so beautiful. She is fair, but also a jewel. She is love and understanding, light and joy, and she has melted his heart to the hatred which had been there. And it really takes on the aspects of the courtly love tradition from medieval literature. Think Lancelot and Guinevere, before things turn ugly. Which basically means the utter devotion of a knight to his lady, which is a love, but a chaste love, and a desire of the knight to honor the lady and to defend her at all costs. And this is what Eomer has walked into when he makes his remark about Galadriel, or as he calls her, the Lady in the Golden Wood, again saying, "Few escape her nets, but if you have her favor, then you also are net weavers and sorcerers, maybe." Which one could argue isn't all that bad a thing, but not when faced with the devotion that Gimli has for his lady. He will defend her at all costs, despite being surrounded by 100 men of the mark bearing spears. Tensions do ease, though, thanks to Aragorn, and to the nobility of Eomer, and his willingness to bend the rules a little. But Gimli has not forgotten what Eomer has said about his lady, even when Eomer, to the shock and surprise of his men, defies orders and lets these 3 strangers go, with a pair of horses no less. "The matter of the Lady Galadriel lies still between us. I have yet to teach you gentle speech." "We shall see," said Eomer. "So many strange things have chanced that to learn the praise of a fair lady under the loving strokes of a dwarf's axe will seem no great wonder." Eomer has not forgotten this moment a few days later, when he and Gimli meet again, everyone now preparing to go to Helm's Deep. At the gate they found a great host of men, old and young, all ready in the saddle. More than 1,000 were there mustered. Their spears were like a springing wood. Gimli stood ill at ease, frowning, but Eomer came up to him, leading his horse. "Hail, Gimli Glow-in-Sun," he cried. "I have not had time to learn gentle speech under your rod, as you promised. But shall we not put aside our quarrel? At least I will speak no evil again of the Lady of the Wood."
"I will forget my wrath for a while, Eomer, son of Eamund," said Gimli. "But if ever you chance to see the Lady Galadriel with your eyes, then you shall acknowledge her the fairest of ladies, or our friendship will end."
"So be it," said Eomer. And from there, not only does Eomer have Gimli ride on his horse with him to Helm's Deep, but they fight together there as well, killing many orcs between them. Gimli perhaps the fiercer of the two. Aragorn at least says of him, "Never did I see an axe so wielded." Undoubtedly not. But Aragorn would have seen some serious axe-wielding if things had come to a head between Gimli and Eomer, as those words of Gimli's which brought us here promised. Again, it's all about Galadriel and Gimli's devotion to her, which does it. And I would say Eomer's obvious status as an honorable man, since it's he who brings up the matter yet again, a matter which has gone unspoken of for some time, and maybe always would. But again, here we are, on July 18, with Eomer saying, "Alas, I will not say that she is the fairest lady that lives."
"Then I must go for my axe."
And again, I would love to think that this was meant comically, but the devotion to his lady is too strong. I do feel like Gimli would have gone and gotten his axe and gone to battle with Eomer. The only thing that brings a little doubt into this would be Galadriel's words to Gimli. Not the ones said back in Lothlorien, but the ones that he hears in Fangorn Forest. And that is where Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli encounter the newly resurrected Gandalf, who has arrived here from Lothlorien. After sharing his tale of the fight with the Balrog and its aftermath, and the recovery that he received in that land where days bring healing, not decay, he communicates messages which Galadriel has sent to Aragorn and Legolas. "Dark are her words," Legolas says of them. And yet Gimli feels heartbroken that she seemingly has nothing for him.
"Then she sent me no message?"
said Gimli, and bent his head. When it turns out that she did, we get this reaction.
"In happy hour you have returned to us, Gandalf!"
cried the dwarf, capering as he sang loudly in the strange dwarf tongue.
"Come, come!" he shouted, swinging his axe. "Since Gandalf's head is now sacred, let us find one that is right to cleave."
And her message to him? "Lockbearer, wherever thou goest, my thought goes with thee. But have a care to lay thine axe to the right tree." The first part of the message warrants his capering reaction, his devotion rewarded, as it were. The meaning of the second part is quite clear in the current context, that being Gimli is not to cut down any living tree in Fangorn. But Galadriel has foresight. Her mirror allows for seeing into the future. And so, does she foresee the moment which Gimli has with Eomer on July 18th? Which is to say, is Eomer the right tree to lay his axe to? Eomer, fellow warrior, one of the heroes of Helm's Deep, and the Pelennor Field, and the Black Gate, and, oh yes, the current king of Rohan? I should say he is the wrong tree in oh so many ways. And yet, stone hard and stubborn, and devoted to his lady. Now, his axe may indeed have been gone for, and who can say who would win in such a battle, Gimli versus Eomer, if it even ever was allowed to take place? Thankfully, Eomer has the right words to diffuse the situation. "But first, I will plead this excuse," said Eomer. "Had I seen her in other company, I would have said all that you could wish. But now I will put Queen Arwen Evenstar first, and I am ready to do battle on my own part with any who deny me. Shall I call for my sword?" This decidedly is not a comical comment either. But it seems as though Eomer knows that he has said the right thing, and he knows that no battle will take place. Gimli, no doubt considering all that they have been through together, and possibly thinking of those words of Galadriel's heard in Fangorn, as well as maybe how she might react now to seeing him fighting Eomer over this difference of opinion, Gimli diffuses things even further. Then Gimli bowed.
"Nay, you are excused, for my part, lord," he said. "You have chosen the evening, but my love is given to the morning, and my heart forebodes that soon it will pass away forever."
And so it would seem that just as Gimli pledged to Galadriel goodwill between the mountain and the wood until the end of days, he has now also pledged goodwill between the mountain and the mark. Because one could argue that it's not just the duel between the two of them that has been dissolved, but the old hatreds as well, those spawned by the story of Fram and the horde of Scatha the Worm. Galadriel's words about friendship between peoples really taking hold. So Gimli, on top of everything else he has done in the War of the Ring, has become an ambassador of peace, burying the hatchet, as it were, or dare I say it, burying the axe in the old feuds, which is another something he surely had no notion of when he set out from Erebor with his father, armed with his short shirt of steel rings, and of course, that axe of his. Meanwhile, Gimli's devotion to his lady, does it ever die? Well, to quote something I will quote in full in just a moment, this is scarcely to be believed. He doesn't seem to ever see her again after he and Legolas leave the great procession from Minas Tirith to Rohan with the body of Theoden, the two friends heading into Fangorn and eventually home. As his heart forebode, Galadriel does leave Middle-earth soon after, or relatively soon anyway, in a couple of years, on the same ship from the Grey Havens, which takes Frodo and Bilbo. We don't know if he ever creates that imperishable crystal with her hair, but it can be assumed that he does. As for what the future brings, well, we have this in the appendices. The final entry in the Tale of Years reads that in Shire Reckoning 1541, or 4th Age 120, then Legolas built a grey ship in Ithilien, and sailed down Anduin, and so over the sea. And with him, it is said, went Gimli the dwarf. This has always been one of the more wonderful moments in the book, but there's more to it if we dig further. And by further, I mean looking into the final volume of Christopher Tolkien's monumental History of Middle-earth series, The Peoples of Middle-earth, which is where we get Tolkien's original draft of the Tale of Years. But there's a difference to this document as compared to the other drafts of material we get in this book, as well as in all the others. For the most part, we see the early workings, first drafts, false starts, and the revisions which led to the final published text. In the case of the Tale of Years, though, what is given in the Peoples of Middle-earth is the final text. Or it would have been if Tolkien had had his way. But Rayner Unwin, of the publishers Allen and Unwin, who had produced the first two volumes of the book and were waiting for Tolkien to complete the appendices so that they could publish the third, wrote to Tolkien on October 22nd, 1954, saying, "The Tale of Years, which I am returning herewith, was interesting, but as you, I think, agree, probably too long for the appendices as it stands. I suggest that considerable reduction be made, and a somewhat more staccato style be adopted." Christopher, in his commentary in the book, adds, if my interpretation of my father's intention for the Tale of Years is at all near the truth, it may be supposed that he carried out this work of shortening with reluctance. So, what is there in the peoples of Middle-earth is what Tolkien wanted the Tale of Years to be. He just didn't have the room. And so, that last entry should have read as follows. But after King Elisar died, Legolas followed at last the yearning of his heart and sailed over the sea. It is said in the Red Book that he took Gimli, Glóin's son, with him, because of their great friendship, such as had never else been seen between elf and dwarf. But this is scarcely to be believed, that a dwarf should be willing to leave Middle-earth for any love, or that the elves should admit him to Avalon if he would go, or that the lords of the West should permit it. In the Red Book it is said that he went also out of desire to see again the Lady Galadriel, whose beauty he revered, and that she, being mighty among the Eldar, obtained this grace for him. More cannot be said of this strange matter. More cannot be said, except that he did manage to sneak that paragraph into the appendices. He just tacked it onto the end of the Durin's Folk section. Well played, John Ronald. And more shall not be said here, except that Gimli's words,
I must go for my axe,
are one of the little things that I love in The Lord of the Rings. Thank you for listening, and have a wonderful day.